Good evening and welcome to Pressing Issues. Today is Sunday, June 28th, 2020, and I am your host, Jason Diffendahl, for this week's episode of Pressing Issues. Today, we're going to talk about the Park Pass reservation system that launched earlier this week. We'll also talk about the Disney Vacation Club resorts that have reopened as of Monday. And we'll talk about the Disneyland Resort delaying its reopening from July 17th to an undisclosed date in the future. So I'd like to welcome my panel here today. We have David Smith.
Hey everyone, good to be here.
We have Rob Whiteside.
What's up, guys? Happy weekend ending.
And we have Ashley Jasmer.
Hello.
All right, so let me start off this episode by saying the other big news that I didn't mention that happened this week was Disney announcing that they're retheming Splash Mountain to The Princess and the Frog. We're not going to talk about that on this show. If you are interested in hearing people talk about that, you have two different shows on our YouTube channel. The one that we broadcast live right after the announcement happened. And then there was News Tonight, WW News Tonight, from this past Thursday, where we also had about an hour-long discussion of the Splash Mountain news. And so I thought that was enough news coverage for that, and you probably don't want to hear more people talking about that. So I thought we'd cover news that's a little bit more exciting, a little bit more fun, which is the park passes and the DVC resorts. So we will start off talking about the park pass system that launched this past Monday. And if you've not been following along because you're not going to Disney World anytime soon, the park pass system opened on Monday for anyone with a hotel reservation and park tickets. And then that followed up on Thursday with the opening to all annual pass holders who were limited to 3 days worth of park pass reservations. And then it opened up today to the rest of the public who already have park tickets. This leaves out a few groups of people, namely those people who have a hotel reservation but not park tickets. And this is especially problematic because, you know, like whether you're a DVC member or not, a lot of people will make a room reservation at a Disney resort and then, you know, wait until the week before you go to buy your annual pass if you're going to buy an annual pass, or get your park tickets, or get your park tickets from AAA or some other discount place. Nobody's buying those tickets like 6 months ahead of time, but they're making their hotel reservation 6 months ahead of time. And DVC members especially can make hotel reservations 11 months in advance and aren't going to buy their tickets till much closer to the time they get there. So in my mind, one of the issues with the system is that even if you have a hotel reservation, you were not allowed to make any park pass reservations until you have ticket media, which is a reasonable restriction, except for you can't buy tickets. So all of the people that have hotel reservations who want to make park pass reservations and don't have tickets can't do anything about it, which in my mind is absurd, but it's Disney and their system of doing things is generally absurd often, most of the time, and so I can't say that I'm surprised. Monday morning, the Park Pass system was scheduled to open at 7 a.m. according to a number of cast members who people had called to ask, and then as it turns out, the Park Pass system didn't open at 7, and it didn't open until several hours later, and then Disney comes out with a statement that said, oh, we never really said it was going to open at 7, so here it's like 9:30, well, now you can have your Park Passes. And then, of course, 1 minute after it opens, the system crashed. Who's surprised by that? I don't think anyone. And then people spend the good part of 2 to 4 hours trying to get park pass reservations for the days that they had hotels booked. With the system crashing repeatedly. Then Disney came out with a statement that said, oh, the system was fine, and the problems that all these people had where Stitch ate the page, or you got a blank white screen, or something else happened, you got into the waiting room and then it kicked you back out. Disney said all of those problems weren't because their system had bugs or glitches. It was because the people trying to make the reservations were trying to do so when it wasn't their turn. So Disney not only comes out and says that it's all our fault, but they have the gall to say that their system worked fine when it clearly didn't. We know it didn't. Their system hasn't worked fine forever. Since it really existed, it hasn't worked fine. But they will not admit that their system is problematic or has glitches, and instead they blamed it on the guests. So not a real good look there. But eventually, I think over the course of the day on Monday, most people were able to get their park passes for the days they wanted. Most parks did not fill up. I think only Hollywood Studios on its first and second day might have filled up for those with hotel reservations. But there's also different buckets of park passes available. So there's a bucket for resort guests, there's a bucket for annual pass holders, and then there's a bucket for people with tickets that aren't annual pass holders. And there's no park that filled up all three of those buckets for any date that is in the near future. And so it seems there's enough space in the parks, and maybe just the allocation of the park passes between the three groups of people is not optimal. And so there are certainly some dates where annual pass holders can't book a park pass, but people with tickets that are not annual pass holders can. We kind of expect Disney to rectify that at some point. I'm sure they couldn't really predict how the breakdown was going to be between hotel guests and annual pass holders and ticket holders. So it's not surprising that the breakdown between those three buckets isn't ideal. And I think that we will probably see them adjust things on the fly. I don't know when. They've got 2 weeks or so yet. But yeah, so that's basically the gist of what happened with the park pass system. And then of course again when they opened up on what was it, Wednesday or Thursday for annual pass holders, of course the system
it was Friday
down again. Oh, it was Friday. Okay.
Yeah.
Of course the system broke again and people weren't able to get in right in the morning. But Disney didn't come out and say anything that time. But that's basically what went on with the park pass system. It seems for most dates there's still plenty of availability. Really the only dates that are kind of booked up by pass holders are around the first week or so after opening, and even then Studios is the park that's in most demand, and that's presumably because it has the least capacity, and so that would naturally book up first because, Epcot has a lot higher capacity. So even though capacity is capped at 25 or 50% or whatever the number is, you're capping it at a much lower level for Studios than you are for any other park. So that's where things stand. I didn't actually have to really deal with the park pass system because I had my sister Jill making my park passes on Monday. So that was nice, but there were certainly people I was with, including Tom, that were trying to make their park pass reservations all day Monday, and were met with frustration after frustration. So I'll turn it over to the panel. Why don't you guys tell me what your experience is or was with the park passes that you tried to book this week?
All right, I'll jump in. So one of the things that I think is interesting is something that we talked about last week about, like, we didn't really know exactly what the system was going to look like. We had an idea from some leaked images what it was going to be, and I actually thought there was going to be an arrival window, and it looks like that wasn't the case. The arrival window is based on whenever the park opens, so they are not staggering people out like I thought they were, which is better because I think everyone thought that was going to be a nightmare to try to enforce, but at the same time it also feels like everyone's going to show up standing in front of the Magic Kingdom at 9 a.m. on July 11th. And I don't think there's a ton of space there to socially distance. So that's going to be an interesting thing on July 11th to see what that mess looks like. But
really
again,
good
it's
point.
good that they did. Yeah, but again, we talked about them trying to enforce that, and how hard that would be. So I'm surprised that as much as they've tried to restrict things by having a registration system, by limiting park hopping, removing fast passes, all that stuff, I'm very surprised that they didn't try to stagger entry. Second thing is, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yep. People want to.
I was just going to say that my conspiracy theory would be is while they're not staggering, at the same token, you could very easily fix it because obviously there's room at, say, the TTC. So you could hold back ferries and monorails if there's not enough room in front at the turnstiles and allow more room. Yeah. So, and the same with resort buses, like you cut back less buses until there's more, I feel like they might have that backup plan in place. That would be my guess, because you're right. There's not enough room. I mean, they've already fixed, you go through security at the TTC or at the resort. So that'll speed up the process. But as far as checking in, there's still not that room. But I won't be surprised if you see people waiting at the TTC to get on a ferry or a monorail to get over and having to wait there as a backup instead of just everybody crowding right in front of the Esplanade at Magic Kingdom.
I also think that they're going to...
Go ahead, Jason.
I was just going to say, I think...
I do wonder if there is some thinking that because of lack of park hopping that there's not as much need for people to get their rope drop. I'm not saying they won't get there. They still will. But I wonder if Disney is thinking that's a natural staggering of, if you're not going to do multiple parks in a day and you're going to focus on a single park, you don't necessarily need to get there at opening, particularly with the reduced capacities. Just a thought.
I mean, that's a fair thought, but I would say then they underestimate people, because if I've gone through all the hoops to get a park reservation for any park, I'm going to be there from open to close, solely because I've jumped through all of your hoops to go to that park. With that being said, though, because of the reservations, they do also know how many people to expect at each park. So, I mean, you're going to have people that are going to sleep in and things like that. So I really think that they're going to have some kind of plan based upon how many people they have arriving at a park, maybe, estimating, trying to ballpark how many people they think they're going to be at rope drop. Maybe plan for 75% to show up and then have to figure it out from there.
My thought and I think all of what you guys have said is probably reasonable. My thought is, for the Magic Kingdom, for example, they've been opening Main Street early for a while. I think they'll probably do that so that there's not a bottleneck at the front gates, and I think they'll probably let people wander around Main Street, and they'll just restrict them from getting too close at the end of Main Street before the park actually opens. Or who knows, maybe they'll just let the ropes down early there too. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I think, Ashley, you're absolutely right that they are going to be able to restrict the buses and the ferries from arriving based on park crowds at the front of the park. And so they'll just tell the buses, hey, wait 5 minutes before you come. Or
take the scenic route to get to the park.
Or something. And realistically, the only resort that they can't do that for is Bay Lake, because you can just walk over. But then again, the people at Bay Lake come in through a different security checkpoint anyway, and so they have the possibility of having a socially distanced line at that security checkpoint, that's pretty easy because it's a single walkway, so they could certainly set up markers on the pavement for them. So yeah, I think it's really incumbent upon them to not overcrowd the front of the park when it opens. And I think that for the most part, they'll be able to do that because A, there'll be fewer people. B, they can stagger transportation. But the third thing that nobody mentioned yet is that there's no impetus to get there early. Because other than getting on rides with no waits, there's nothing else that happens early, and with reduced capacity, I don't think there's going to be long waits at all for anything. And so the impetus to get there early is removed by limiting capacity. And then on the opposite side of that, so for example, like I would, depending on my plans, if I was going to stay till park close, I wouldn't necessarily get there at park open. Now there's no actual real impetus to stay until park close simply because there's no fireworks, which in my mind means that, you know, all those people that got there at rope drop in the morning are going to leave at 3 or 4 o'clock, and the last couple hours the park is open is going to be completely empty. And so those people that don't get there at opening are going to have essentially the same crowd level the last 2 hours as the crowd level is the first hour of the park. And that, I think, if people realize that, that will probably very much level out crowds, because when it's the last 2 hours of the park, you don't have to run around like mad to go from ride to ride before the crowds build, because the crowds just keep thinning and thinning.
I mean,
well, one of the problems though
that's
too
fair...
is that I was going to say it's a shortened day though too, is that you only have 10 hours right now, and you're shortening the Magic Kingdom hours. And I know no fireworks, no parade, but you're shortening the Magic Kingdom by 5 to 6 hours a day. Plus the fact that, yeah, there may not be as many lines, but there are a ton of things to do in the Magic Kingdom. And if I've paid for a full vacation, I'm already missing out on fireworks and parades and, you know, Bibbidi Bobbidi Boutique and all the other things I was going to do. I definitely want to get my money's worth out of it and do the entire 10 hours that I'm allotted.
Well,
but the other
right,
thing,
and so that's...
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree.
Is very good. I mean, I tend to agree with Rob too. The problem is that if you're a pass holder, it doesn't matter. Right? Like,
I don't know. I would argue.
You only get 3 days.
Hold on.
You only get 3 days
Yeah,
when you can't park hop. So.
I personally, again, I think that it still matters because, again, especially now, forget the fact that you haven't seen the Magic Kingdom in almost, 4 or 5 months now? Where are we going to be at by the time they open? 3 to 4 months. Yeah, so 4 months. So especially if you're a local pass holder, you haven't been there in 4 months. A lot of people have had vacations canceled. I think a lot of people, I mean, I went to Universal 2 weeks ago now. 2 or 3 weeks ago. And we were there from park open to park close. Now, I know that they're not generally open quite as late anyway, but the thought of it was, you know, we want to make sure that we get our money's worth because we're having to go the extra mile to enjoy these parks anyway. So if I'm going through everything that I need to go through to get there and enjoy them, I'm going to take, and not to mention the fact, I'm going to take advantage. If there's reduced hours, or not reduced hours, if there's reduced, waits for everything, I'm going to run around like a mad woman anyway and just enjoy the fact that for the first time, the Magic Kingdom isn't crowded. And I'm going to want to soak that up for as long as possible. Because when things do eventually return to normal, that will never be the case ever again.
Yeah.
I'm still not convinced wait times are going to be lower, but you are right on the point. It should be less crowded within the common areas.
So I will tell you, David, from my experience at Universal, because I was at Universal
I was going to say,
last week, right? My experience at Universal, the wait times are absolutely lower. There are differences between attractions, and it depends on how the attractions get loaded and things like that. So, for example, in Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey, where the ride vehicles seat 4, they would put 1 party per vehicle, which means if you're a party of 4, you fill the vehicle. If you're a party of 1, then there's 3 seats empty. And so what that means is that in that ride, the capacity is somewhere between 25 and 100%, just depending on the how big the parties are that come in. On other attractions, like for example the Jurassic Park River Adventure, they only seat every other row, which there immediately gives you 50% of capacity, and then also they don't put unrelated parties in the row, which drops the capacity even lower than 50%. But in both of those cases, the lines were not long at all for either one of those rides, and so I think that's probably because the parks just weren't that full. And so at a 25% capacity, I think Magic Kingdom's is not going to be that full. Where it was very noticeable that there were significant restrictions in place were shows like the Bourne Stuntacular and Poseidon's Fury. Both of those are stage shows that have an absolutely specific size of the area for guests. In Poseidon's Fury, it's standing, and Bourne Stuntacular, it's sitting. But regardless, in order to maintain social distancing of 6 feet, those attractions are at minimal capacity. Those in Poseidon's Fury, I think they would normally be able to fit maybe like 100 people per show. And when I went, there were 12 spots for parties of whatever size. So that's anywhere between like 12 and 48 people if the parties are all size of parties of 4. So that's easily 25% or less capacity. And Poseidon's Fury had one of the longer waits at Universal. And the Bourne Stuntacular was still doing technical previews, and I think it still is, which means they didn't really announce when it was going to happen, but people queued up outside, and there was a fairly long queue, and I actually made it into the queue the second to last party before they cut it off. But the seating was so spread out, they were only seating every other row in the theater, and then there had to be 3 empty seats between parties. And so that is somewhere around maybe 25% capacity too. So it's those kinds of things that where the capacity is so limited. But for things like attractions where they seat every other row, you're still at like 40 or 50% capacity. So it very much differs based on the type of attraction and how much space there is.
I was going to say, when we were there, sorry, I was just going to say real quick, the only time that we noticed a wait really for anything was the Hogwarts Train. And that was solely because they were only putting one group per cabin. And yep. I mean, that capacity is already kind of poor anyway. And when you have one person taking up a cabin that's intended for up to 8 people,
yes,
I think we waited about 45 minutes for a train one day.
Absolutely.
But again, it wasn't terrible. And if you think about it logically in the Magic Kingdom, like most of their attractions kind of are already like Mansion and Pan and all of that. And like Small World, you could seat every other row in the boats and it's still going to flow continuously. So I don't know. I think at least for the first little while, there's actually probably going to be significantly reduced wait times. I think you'll still see it'll still be high on things like space, just because that's going to be difficult to social distance seat unless they just put one party per train, or maybe 2 parties, depending on like if it's just 2 single riders, 1 in each car. And maybe, I'm trying to think what else. I mean, space and, Mine Train probably will be a little bit more difficult, but I don't know. I still think for the vast majority of things, the wait time's going to be way down.
Yeah, I was going to agree with you about the Hogwarts Express. That one was, I think, the worst, and exactly for why you said, because there were, usually they try to put a bunch of people in one cabin. They could only put one party per cabin, and that definitely was such a backup that sometimes, in the past at Universal, I would have probably always taken the train back and forth if I was going back and forth between parks. It really made more sense to actually just walk out the front gate and walk in the front of the other because of how long that train was going to wait. And where I think that and I'm just guessing, but where I think we're going to see a little bit of that too is probably on Kilimanjaro Safari, because of how they pack those trucks. And how many that there are to go around, like how many you have in rotation. So I think that, I mean, you were talking Magic Kingdom specifically, but I think that's definitely going to be a problem. I think it's going to be, I do think it'll be reduced capacity, but I still think that if I'm getting my money's worth when I go there, I want to be there from start to finish of the day. And when we were talking about this earlier, we were talking about, like where they would hold people, I think based on the fact that I think did the math, there were 11 DVC Resorts Open that are available to people. And if you take those, there's 4,900-ish rooms. That the majority of people that are coming in are not going to be coming by bus or monorail, but will be coming by car. And that's going to be a lot harder for them to restrict. So even if there's not that backup at the Magic Kingdom, there's going to be that backup at the TTC, because I think the majority of people who are coming will be coming by car and will all want to be there at 9 a.m.
Yeah, but I think there's more space at TTC to space people out, before they go through security or whatever. I think the real issue is going to be at all the other parks where you can get out of your car and walk right to the park entrance, right? Like Studios is going to be a nightmare, because you get out of your car and you walk up and everybody's following like through one section, and then they have to split up into 20 different lines for security, and you have to keep all them separate. I think the Magic Kingdom is going to be the easiest to manage, which is a good thing, because I think that's where most people are going to want to go anyway.
Well, and you had talked about Studios and it, thinking that it may have filled up earliest because of capacity, and just looking at the internet, which is always iffy about capacities. It says Studios is 60,000 and that Animal Kingdom is 60,000. I think that the difference is that there's a major attraction, Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, that opened in March just before all this stuff shut down, that a lot of people are going to want to go and try for themselves. Plus Rise is still hot because it just opened in December. So I do think that it was a target of the two biggest rides going right now, or attractions, are at Studios. So you take that plus the reduced capacity. Yeah. I'm not surprised that park was one of the first ones to fill up. Absolutely.
Yep. Another thing I want to mention that I realized last week at Universal, and one of the things that we talked about weeks ago, in terms of crowd issues and wait times, was that we had thought weeks ago that cast members were going to have to sanitize the ride vehicles in between each ride. So that would mean, you'd have to put a train through Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, and then it comes back to the station, and then somebody would have to take the time to wipe down all of the high touch areas before the next group of people could get on. And we thought that was going to be the case, and my experience at Universal was they did none of that. What they did instead was they forced everybody to get a squirt of hand sanitizer immediately before they boarded the ride vehicles. And while that's not the same thing, because certainly if you have coronavirus and you sneeze, it's going to get on the ride vehicle.
But you're supposed to keep your mask on. So in theory, not necessarily. And so, while I think it must have been decided by somebody that is almost as good as sanitizing the ride vehicles in between every guest. And that's what Universal did. And I think that worked out pretty well. I think that certainly kept lines sped up much faster than if they would have had to stop the ride and sanitize the ride vehicles in between each run through the attraction. So, that was something that we had talked about, but didn't actually see in action until I went to Universal and realized that's what they were doing instead.
Just curious on the experience.
So, Jason, I have a question.
Did you have any issues keeping your masks on during the attractions? I'm saying
question.
Specifically the faster ones, or.
Yep. Ashley, what's your question? And I'll answer them both at once.
I was just gonna say, because when I was down there, and just for the record, David, the two that I had trouble with was Hulk and Hagrid's were the two that my mask legitimately fell a couple of times. Because sense. I had a gator mask on for most of the day when it would start to get really hot, and it would fall. But I'd put it right back up and it would just fall again. But anyway, my question was, Jason, when you were there, did you notice? Because I will say this, they did the hand sanitizer and, keep your masks on and everything. But then there was also, I saw a huge amount of people sanitizing in the queues. And then I did also see, I think there was just about every attraction, there was at least one person consistently in the queue walking around, wiping down every handrail, every touch point surface that they could get to that was being used to sanitize. And then also there were a handful of times where we noticed that I think it may have been after so many runs, they would actually spray down the car. I saw that on Hulk and also Forbidden Journeys specifically, where they were spraying down. And actually at Forbidden Journeys, they were doing it after each one. As you would get off and before it would go on the Omnivore load, there was somebody spraying down each one and wiping it real quick as it went by. So I was just curious if they were still doing it when you went.
What I saw for the most part was that there were a lot of cast members wiping down like railings in the queues.
Yeah.
I didn't see much wiping down of ride vehicles. I did see them spraying like seats in theaters with some kind of spray. Like those seats are fabric, but they would go and they would mist them with a squirt bottle of sanitizer or whatever. But I didn't see the ride vehicles really get wiped down very often. But yeah, certainly railings and things like that, handrails, like the escalator handrails and the moving walkway handrails and stuff, absolutely. David, Ashley had a problem with Hulk and Hagrid's. I didn't ride Hulk, so I didn't have a problem with Hulk. I know we had pictures of one of the first days that it was open where there was a mask on the rocks along the water at Hulk, so I'm not surprised Hulk is an issue. I didn't ride Rip Ride Rocket either, so that would be my other thought as to a problem. Hagrid's I was fine with. Jill lost her glasses on her sunglasses on Hagrid's, but I didn't have a problem with my mask on Hagrid's. Yeah, it was her own fault because she looked up at some point in the ride and the glasses like just flew off her head. So that was she fully admits that was her own fault.
You know what? Honestly,
but yeah, no, I didn't see really any problems. I didn't have any, the only ride that I remember that they told you could take your mask off during the ride was Jurassic Park River Adventure.
I was going to say, the water rides, so that one, Dudley, and Popeyes, all three of the water attractions where you can get splashed in the face by a large amount of water. When we were there, they did tell us, like, you can, once you were seated and everything in your car,
yes.
like, you can take your mask down. You still had to hold it with you so that you could put it right back on, but you could take it down just so that you didn't have a wet mask for the rest of the day.
Right. And what was really interesting was that they told you in other rides that you absolutely couldn't do that. Like we were on Spider-Man.
You were under surveillance. Yeah, you were under surveillance in the train. They made that very clear.
One party per ride vehicle, you were way more than 6 feet away from anybody else.
I think their thought was, because we actually asked a cast member about that, because again, we weren't trying to be difficult. We were just curious, like if it's just us, and they were like, well, if you think about it though, like other people are walking into that car right after you've been there and the air is trapped.
And they're not sanitizing the car in between or anything.
Exactly.
Right? Yep,
yeah,
for sure.
So that's why you had to keep your mask on the train.
But I mean, people are walking into the ride vehicle in Jurassic Park River Adventure right after you get out too, so...
but that's open air. It's not like a confined cabin.
That's true.
Well, and also, the same reason that they say at Volcano Bay that you don't necessarily, or by the pool, that you don't necessarily need a mask is they're saying that the chemicals in the water, will contain the germs. Maybe they feel like that's the same way for the water vehicles. But I think that the whole reason for that on a water ride is that if you have a wet mask, you're basically being waterboarded. And so that, they kind of gave you a pass on that. So,
yeah.
We did all three of those rides too, and without masks. And, honestly, the whole mask thing, and I know that's been the big hubbub leading up to this. And again, I asked some people on Instagram, like, what's going to keep you back? And many people said, I just don't want to have to wear a mask. And I didn't find it to be that bad. I mean, I used the gator style mask most of the time, and you know, I could pull it out a little bit, you know, to breathe a little bit more if I needed to. And then on the water rides, you take them off, and when you're eating, you take them off. And it was definitely a relief to sit down at a table and take them off for when you were eating. But it was not, I didn't find it to be that horrible. And, you know, I've said on the show before that, like, if they told me, you know, I had to, you know, carry around like, you know, a 10-pound barbell while I'm walking through the park, whatever it takes to get back, I want to do it. But the mask thing only really became a problem for me. And, Jason, I think maybe, I don't know if you guys had this problem or not, but when we were on Spider-Man and we had to wear the 3D glasses, your glasses fogged up. And right, so you like in that one, it was almost like I felt like I needed to hold my breath a little bit so that I wasn't fogging my glasses up. But for the rest of the time, I found it very bearable. And even though they had those U-rest zones, I never felt like I needed to stop in them to do anything because we had enough breaks.
I never went in one either. No.
Yeah, with meals and things, you don't really necessarily need them.
Yeah.
Now, I will say that may change once it gets even hotter and more humid. You may need those. But again, to Rob's point, and for anybody that's considering going, if the mask is your holding back point, I have yet to really, my sister had some difficulty with the mask, but the rest of us didn't. Gator style masks are definitely the way to go. They're a little bit more breathable, a little bit more comfortable. But even, I mean, we had found some fun Harry Potter fabrics before we went. So we decided, you know, to have some fun with making masks as a kind of cool lead up to our vacation. So, I mean, it was different. But once you kind of, after about the first hour, you would almost kind of forget. At least that was my experience, until you got thirsty or hungry, or were on something like Spider-Man where you had to wear glasses that would get fogged up. But that was ours. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, certainly different masks. Some are better than others in like sort of the heat and humidity. I bought the universal masks that they sell there, which are made of sort of a synthetic, you know, spandex type material, and those were fairly easy to breathe it through too. Certainly, I would say certainly easier than cotton, which sort of got moist in the humidity. But you know, I didn't use a gator, but I think that would be even easier. Might try that next time I go down. But
can I tell you something
for the
silly?
Most part, yeah.
So this is typical of Disney fanatics, I think, and maybe even Universal fanatics. But my son had like one of those double layer cottons, and my daughter and I were both wearing the gator style. And we went into ET, and my daughter was talking about how much she loved the smell in the queue of ET. And my son was like, that was his biggest drawback from the thing, the mask that he was wearing, is he felt like he was being robbed of the smells that you're used to smelling when you go through different attractions and things. So I didn't have that problem with the gator. So just putting that out there if you want to try that next time. But the smells were definitely not as potent through the double layer cotton.
I mean, usually I don't relish the smells of attractions, unless they're smells that are designed to be there, like with a Smellitzer. But for the most part, yes, attractions generally kind of only smell bad to me. So that's kind of funny.
You're doing it wrong.
I guess. Who knows? I don't know. Yeah, so that's that. I think somehow we were supposed to talk about the park pass system, and
I just want to circle back to that real quick.
Universal. But yeah, sure.
I want to circle back to that real quick, Jason. Just, you know, in terms of, you know, people that have their tickets already, you know, I think they know the plan. It's interesting what you said at the beginning about people who are planning trips. You know, it is a different way of buying. Typically, I know we would make our resort reservation, and then a couple months later, we would make our park. We would buy park tickets, probably annual passes in most case, but you almost had to do it all at the same time now. When you go to buy tickets, since that opened up just today, you know, they're still offering 1 to 14-day tickets. What's interesting is they still do offer the park hopper option, but these are for tickets starting January 1st. So it goes January 1st through September 26th is all that they're selling. When you're buying that, they give you the availability for the parks throughout that entire time period. So you can look and see when parks are available. Right now, of course, everything is available through the rest of the year, except for that first week in July, you know, the July 11th through 18th week. that's sometimes when there's not, Hollywood Studios isn't necessarily available, but they do let you do that. Now, what I didn't see is that when you buy them, that you get the option to make your reservations right then. It looks like you have to complete that transaction, and then you can go back in and make your park reservations.
Yeah, so I think it's feasible that in the minutes between when you actually complete the ticket purchase transaction and you go into the system to link your tickets to your Magic Band and then make the park passes, it seems possible that they could fill up, but I think that's not going to happen for the most part, because it's really only going to happen to one person, right? Like at some point it happens and it fills up and then it's full, and so it's only going to happen for one person and then be done. So I think that will happen, but I don't think it's going to be a big issue.
Right, and they're also not selling annual passes yet.
Right, and that's the bigger issue, is that people who want to buy either annual passes or tickets, if they have a reservation, say December 13th instead of January 1st, they still can't buy tickets.
Can't do it. Yep.
There's something magical about 2021 that's not applicable to 2020. That means if you're going in 2021, you can buy your tickets already, but you can't if you're going in December of 2020. I don't get it. I don't think they necessarily get it either. Like,
I would assume it was because they're still trying to accommodate people, right? For those 3 months that they were down, because they've told the people who already had bought or already had reservations for that time. Like, I got an email about that too, that that if you had a reservation for some time in that time, that you were, basically you got first right to go ahead and fix that time. I assume they're still leaving some of that time open for the people they need to do make goods for, no?
Well, I mean, there are certainly people that had reservations booked in January, February, and March of 2021 before the pandemic closure. That is the same as what you're saying. I mean, you could generally book your Disney trip a year in advance. So, if that was the case, then they should have made the tickets available for people that have booked after like March 15th, because that's when they closed. So I don't know. I mean, to some extent, yeah, but I also think to some extent 2021 is an arbitrary cutoff point that they just decided upon.
Okay.
All right, so we got in our Universal talk there, which is always fun. I think what we're going to move to next is the DVC Resorts reopening, and I'm going to pull up the chat because I haven't been looking at the chat. Rob and I were
for a while they were just talking about the color of the castle, so make sure to buy that.
Oh yeah, that's what I wanted to say. I wanted to say Ashley's talking about all these people that are going to show up at the Magic Kingdom when it first opens because they haven't been there for weeks, and half of them are going to walk under the train station and see the castle and be like, nope, and turn around and go home. That thing is so ugly.
It is. Why?
Oh, it's terrible.
Who and why?
It's terrible.
It's awful.
It is. It's so awful.
I hope they change it back very soon. I can't imagine that's going to stick around.
I hope they bought really, really cheap paint and it fades in like 3 months. That's what I hope.
Although somebody in the chat earlier when they were talking about that did bring up a good point for maybe a mini segue. Do we think that that's going to affect the color quality of the projections for like Happily Ever After? Now that they're changing,
for the most, that was a question that other people had asked me too. They will adjust the projections to account for the color. Yes, but
do you think they're going to do it right?
Oh, I mean, once you have the right hue built in, you just do the color correction for everything, and I think it's fine. So I don't foresee that being a problem. I think the projection shows are going to be fine. They're not starting projection shows either for a while, so it almost doesn't make any difference. Maybe the thing will fade before they start the projection shows. But yeah, the what's really funny is they have this horrible, ugly pink castle just in time for the 50th. And in the Disney Style store in Disney Springs, they're selling a retro 25th anniversary shirt that has the castle cake on it. And so it's like the 25th anniversary of the 25th anniversary castle is now pink again, which I just thought was amusing. But yeah, I'm just hoping the paint fades really quickly. But yeah, that's okay. So what we're segueing to now is the DVC Resorts Open, and the reason that I know the castle is so ugly is because on Monday and Tuesday, I stayed at the Polynesian and the Bay Lake Tower at the Contemporary, so I had up-close views of the ugly castle color, mostly from the Contemporary, which was... I specifically booked a theme park view room, even though there were no fireworks to watch, just because I wanted a view of the theme park. And so that's basically probably about as close as you could get to the castle, at least like a big expansive view of the castle, not over trees or whatnot. And yeah, it's pretty bad. I really do like the blue that they painted the roofs of the turrets, but the pink is bad.
It's like they forgot which princess it was. Like, again, it makes sense for Sleeping Beauty because she's half, you could say pink and blue, and that's what they did in Disneyland, but it makes no sense for Cinderella's castle. I don't get it.
I don't know. I don't understand it all. I hope it fades, or I hope they repaint it later or something. I don't know what's going to happen. But yeah, so that's... Rob and I were both at DVC Resorts, and Tom was there. Did you see construction? Yes, we absolutely did. I got some great pictures of the Tron construction. It's still going on. There's not much really to make it look any different. But yeah, we got some good pictures from the room. We're on the 12th floor of the Bay Lake Tower, which was pretty nice. So I was at the Polynesian on Monday. And Bay Lake Tower on Tuesday. I know Rob was at the Boardwalk for a couple of days. I also visited the Riviera to have character breakfast at Topolino's. We visited Kidani Village to have dinner at Sanaa. We visited the Beach Club to have dinner at Beaches and Cream. And so, where else did we go? Oh, we visited Old Key West to have lunch at Olivia's. And so we covered a lot. Axel was at the Grand Floridian, and I went over there to check things out. So we covered almost all the DVC resorts except Saratoga, but we covered quite a few of the DVC resorts, and just to check out how things were going. So, I mean, I can recap what everything was like. The check-in procedure.
My first question, Jason.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I mean, my first question would just be, how did the resorts feel in terms of crowds? I mean, and I imagine there's a difference between like Bay Lake and Contemporary than there would be at Old Key West necessarily. But what was the general feeling as you arrived?
A question in the chat I just want to address too, right before I get started. Somebody asked, how do we get in? We thought you had to have a reservation again to get into the Grand Floridian. I was in the car with Axel, and Axel was staying there. So he basically got me in, and we went up to his room. You do have to have a reservation, a dining reservation or a resort reservation to get into any resort. They are actually really pretty strict about this. Because we wanted to eat at Olivia's, but we didn't have a reservation because we called and they said Olivia's was closed, even though it wasn't. So we didn't have an Olivia's reservation. So because we were driving from the Contemporary, we were going to go to Springs, we pulled into Old Key West and we asked the guard, we just want to go eat at Olivia's, but we don't have a reservation. But we're staying at the Contemporary, so like we're staying on property, but we don't have a reservation for Olivia's. And he said, nope, can't let you in. And I'm like, but we want to give you money. Do you not want to take our money? Like, we're going to spend money to eat there. Would you rather us not spend money to eat there? He's like, can't let you in. And then I said, we could just, like, go to the Disney Springs and hop on a bus. He's like, nope, can't let you in. And then we're like,
so are they
okay,
checking for reservations when you board a bus?
No, not at all. So that's how we got there. And so I said, oh, well, I'm just going to go get on a bus and I'll see you in about half an hour. And he's like, well, you found the workaround. But to be honestly, the difference, I think, is that he couldn't let us in, not because he didn't want to, but because he would have gotten in trouble. Whereas the bus drivers in Springs aren't required to check people's I mean, they could certainly give all the bus drivers Magic Band readers and make sure that people have a reservation or whatnot to go to a resort, but they don't. And so it makes it difficult, but not impossible, to do these kinds of things, which in some ways is annoying, to have to take a bus when you could drive your own car. I think it's more dangerous because it's easier to spread virus on a mass transit, sort of ride than it is in your own car. But that's just
devil's advocate, though. I mean, apart from us crazy people, how many people do you honestly think are going to take a bus to Disney Springs just to hop on a bus just to go to a restaurant?
I mean, apparently Tim Tracker did. Someone said in the chat they saw him on the boardwalk.
Well, right. But I'm just saying for the average guest or the average person who's like, I'm staying at the Poly, but I want to go eat at Old Key West or Boardwalk or whatever. And they get to the guard shack and the guard's like, nope, sorry, I can't let you in unless you have a reservation to eat here or you're staying here. Most are probably going to say, oh, okay, and then go back and try to get a reservation for a later time. Like, they're not going to want to go through the hassle of going all the way to Springs to hop a bus and then have to go all the way back to Springs. Like, it's kind of a production unless you're somebody like us who does these things on the regular just because. Like, most people are not going to go through that much effort.
I totally agree. I mean, people are saying in the chat, like, it's like the buses run every 30 minutes, so it could be like a 2-hour excursion. I mean, we wanted to go to Old Key West and walk around and shop, and I'm a DVC member, so, it was something we were going to plan to invest a couple of hours in anyway, so it wasn't a huge deal. It also let us try the buses, because otherwise we would not have tried the buses at all, and so we got to see the bus setup. But the other question somebody asked in the chat was about the Premier Pass and passes getting extended. We can talk about that. Let's talk about that when we talk about Disneyland reopening. So if you're still in the chat and watching, ask again at that point in time.
So can I jump in and talk about
somebody else in the chat? Wait, this is really important. Somebody in the chat said Tim Tracker's mustache bugs me. So I'm glad that my mustache doesn't bug you, and thanks for watching. But yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Rob.
No, I was just going to say, I totally get it. I mean, we've all been missing Disney a lot, and they opened Disney Springs, and that gave us a little taste of Disney. And, obviously people are going, and when I went to Disney Springs, I was shocked that if you looked around and didn't pretended like there weren't a ton of masks there, it looked like any other normal situation in Disney Springs that I've ever been to. There were a ton of people there walking around. It seemed normal. There were a lot of times where I was on this trip that, I could sort of forget about the pandemic a little bit. When you look around and you see all the people that were there. So, everybody wants that taste of Disney. And I think that for us, we like going and, visiting the different hotels, taking the Skyliner from one to the next, or going to those restaurants that are there that we haven't been able to get into for 3 or 4 months. I know Tom has a real big Sanaa problem. We're going to have to get him on a 12-step program at some point. But
Absolutely.
A lot of people have been missing these restaurants, and they're really great restaurants. And especially now that you don't have the parks there to go to, the restaurants and the hotels are kind of the attraction. And so even though there are only 11 of them open, and even though it's for DVC only, I understand why they have to stop people at the front gate. And I understand why you had to have a reservation to get into these, because otherwise people like who randomly get on a bus and go over to a resort would be able to just get into these restaurants and kind of take away from the people who are using their points to get there. But also they would fill up. And so they, when we were staying at Boardwalk, there was one night where Jason and company, they were at Beaches and Cream. We were going to go over and try to get just a walk-up reservation because, talking about the system that was for, reserving park passes, we also had the problem that we tried calling the entire day down to try to make a reservation at Whispering Canyon on our drive down on Monday. And it was busy signals the whole time because you cannot get through to make a reservation and you can't do it online. So the only time we could make a reservation was at the front desk. So when we got there, we were able to make one at the front desk for Whispering Canyon, but we thought, the Boardwalk and Beaches and Cream, we'll just walk over there. It shouldn't be any big deal. We walked over and she said, we're not taking walk-ups. You have to make a reservation. That was frustrating because I was like, okay, so I can't go on and make a reservation because they're not online and I can't call, but I can't walk up either because I can't have, it was just this it was very frustrating. So I went to the front desk and asked them if we could get a reservation, and they looked into the system and said, no, we don't have anything for tonight, but if you walk up after 8:15, because they close at 9, that there's a chance you might get in. So it was just, even at that point where you have limited capacity in the hotels already, it was very frustrating to try to get in. And when we were at Whispering Canyon Cafe, we had an 8:30, 7:30-ish reservation, and we were in there. We were like one of 4 groups that was in that hotel. Or in that restaurant. It was kind of eerie. They weren't doing any of the hooting and hollering or any of that kind of stuff. There was no the screaming ketchup or the pony rides or anything like that. It was very calm. It was a good meal, and it was great to actually have that Disney meal, with the family style plate. We got the traditional skillet. It was fantastic. The waitress actually asked us if we wanted to take some home with us, which is, she said, usually when you ask for more, we don't do that, but we have so much food right now that if you want to take some home with you, you can. And so I was just, it was a really neat experience to experience these hotels and these restaurants. And I remember when we came up, when they announced that, June 22nd, you can get into DVC, but you cannot get into the parks until July 11th. I think a lot of people, including myself, were going, well, now why would you do that? Why would you spend your points to go and stay at a DVC resort when you can't go into the parks? And yet something's just snapped in my head and said, I want out. I want to get out of my house. I want to take a vacation. Yeah. I have these points. I can go to Universal during the day. I can sleep in a Disney hotel. I can go and check out these restaurants. And I don't regret any of it. So even though, and the cool part of it, and I think we talked about this on the DVC episode of Pressing Issues, was it wasn't hard to make a reservation. Like days beforehand, I could make a reservation.
Yeah.
And so it was really neat to be able to do that. And when I showed up at the Boardwalk and checked in, all the cast members, they're wearing the Mickey gloves. There were times where they'd be lined up on each side in the lobby to tell you have a great day or welcome back. And, so and a lot of them would pull us aside and we're like, thank you for coming back. We're so excited to have you here. And it was the first day, it was the 22nd that we checked in at night. And everyone was just as nice as could be, and accommodating. And it was really like a kind of special experience. It really did feel like we were coming home, even though you couldn't go to the parks and do all the things that you normally would do. The pools were open. You could still do that. We had a pool view that was amazing. So one of the funny things that happened to me, and I mentioned this on Park Center, was when I pulled up to the guard gate, I started like chit-chatting with the guard as we were trying to come in. And he said, you know what, I hope you don't mind if I can ask you a question. Why are you here? And I was just like, Good question. My wife's been asking me that too. I think that the reason we're here is we want to get away, and we want a little bit of the magic. We want to be able to, get back to Disney, and we've missed it. And he's like, well, we've missed you. And it was just this great, and I said something about, well, we're going to go to Universal tomorrow. He's like, me too. I'm going to be at Volcano Bay tomorrow. So it was really neat to be able to interact again. I saw a woman who was cleaning a bench, and they were doing a really good job. This was outside at the boardwalk, and just doing a great job on that. And I said, hey, do you mind if I take a picture? And I meant of her. And she said, oh, we're not allowed to hold your phones. They told us we're not allowed to take pictures. And I said, no, I just want one of you. And she was like, oh, okay, sure. Posed a little bit for me. But it was, and then, they had just come back, and I think they were all excited to be there. So it's, I hate to use the word unprecedented, but it came up a lot. It comes up a lot every day for all of us. It was an unprecedented time to be there. And I took pictures of everything. I ran into Jason in the beach club, walking around as he was taking pictures of everything. So, I mean, it was really kind of neat. It was, David, to your point, like, what did it feel like? There weren't a ton of people around, which was very different. And maybe a lot of them were in their rooms. Maybe a lot of them were, down by the pool. The woman, when we checked in, said the boardwalk had the most check-ins of anybody, which I'm not surprised by, because I think it's one of the best ones at the lower point rate that was available. So I think that's why we did it, is because you could get a really good point rate, but yet it was, right around the water there. And my son and I went out at night and walked the boardwalk a little bit, and, kind of took in the sights, and cried a little bit in front of Jelly Rolls for Pete Carney because it wasn't open. And, just really kind of had a neat experience. It was not your typical Disney experience, but I still had a great time.
That sounds awesome. Sorry, Jason. I just had one quick thing that I noticed is that you said that they weren't allowed to hold your phone anymore. That's interesting. I mean, it makes total sense, but it's it's interesting that they've already told them, because, like, again, I remember from when I was a cast member, that was something that they always told you to kind of be mindful of. Like, if you saw a family and, like, mom was, like, stepping out of the picture to take a picture of the family, like, be sure to walk up and say, oh, can I take the picture for you so that you can get in the picture with your family? And again, it makes total sense. I'm not blaming them or anything, but it'll be I think you'll see, I don't know, maybe they'll have more PhotoPass people out to try to compensate for that.
Well, that used to be our main use of the PhotoPass people was to do it with our phone, but they can't do that now. So I don't know.
Yeah, they can't do it now. So might have more people buying PhotoPass.
Yeah, I think so. I absolutely, that's the case. Just a couple things. I want to give a shout out to Marklin, who gave us a $5 super chat. Thank you very much, Marklin.
Oh, thank you.
I want to give a shout out to all of the people in the chat who are saying that they enjoy getting their news from WDWNT. And they had all been chatting about the trackers for a little while, and then somebody said, oh, maybe it's rude to talk about other YouTubers while we're watching a WDWNT show. And I said, as long as you think we're better, then it's okay. But yeah, so I want to follow up to Rob's experience with some of my experience, because we stayed in different hotels and had different experiences. So unlike Rob, I went to the Polynesian and the Contemporary and didn't go to Universal. I had been to Universal the whole week before. So we checked in at the Polynesian at 6:30 in the morning. On Monday. We were the first guests there. They gave us a nice little welcome gift because they were so excited to have guests back. The woman at the gate almost shed a tear. She was so happy to have guests back. The people at the front desk were ecstatic. So it was really great. It sort of like made me get teary-eyed a little bit. The same thing happened with the restaurants and things like that. We had Kona breakfast, and the servers there were so here's the thing, and this happened. This is how it is all over right now. Is that there's obviously only a small amount of cast members that have been called back. Right, not all the cast members are called back, and they're all called back in by order of seniority. What that means is that you have the cream of the crop cast members working right now, because they're the ones with the most seniority. They're the ones that have been there back when they knew what customer service was. They're the ones that love their job because they've stuck around for so long. There's no college program kids or anything. These are all like older and long-time cast members. And so they're the ones that make the experience magical. And they're so good at it, and they've been so good at it for years. And so when those are the types of cast members that you're interacting with day in and day out, it is a fantastic experience. So number one, the cast members make the experience fantastic because they're all longtime cast members, and so that's great. That's amazing. We had a Magic Kingdom view in the Polynesian. It was a great view. It was a really nice room. A couple of things, and I took video. I haven't posted it yet. I took video. So somebody in the chat said he has a friend who got called back, and she's only been there for like 4 to 5 years. 4 to 5 years is, in my mind, a long-term cast member, because the turnover is so bad at Disney World.
Yeah.
The turnover is so bad that 4 to 5 years is a pretty long time. So we had a great time walking around the Polynesian. We had a great time going in the pool. I will say, and this is what I took. I took a video. This was from the balcony of the Contemporary Bay Lake Tower, but I could have done the same at the Polynesian. I took a 5-minute video off the balcony at the Contemporary, and I didn't hear any ferry boat horns blaring. I didn't hear any bus backing up beeping. I heard birds. Like, it doesn't really hit you how much noise pollution there is at Walt Disney World until you're there and everything is quiet and you can hear the birds. That is one of the most amazing experiences that we had the 3 days we were there, simply because it's not something you can get any other way anywhere else. Like, it's only because of the situation that we're in that you can get an experience like that. And yeah, the fact that we were at the Polynesian and didn't hear fairy horns till like 11 o'clock at night, that's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So that really, the peacefulness and the calmness of the resorts was one of the best things. And if somebody said, like, should I book a resort and just go to the resort and not go to the parks? Like, if you can have this kind of calm and serene experience, then it's absolutely worth it. I would absolutely, like, if the parks are closed and the DVC Resorts Open, I would go back. Absolutely. No questions asked. I would go back. It was so relaxing. It was so nice to be able to go to the pool at the Polynesian and, you know, just sit in the pool and chat, you know, talk to people. We, Drunk at Disney came. We chatted with him for a while. I never met him before, so that was nice. Hi, Drunky. So, you know, it was nice to have just a relaxing visit to a place where your visits are so not relaxing any other time. It's such a high-stress vacation. I mean, people always say you come home from Disney and you need a vacation from your vacation, and that's absolutely the case. These 3 days that we spent at the DVC resorts were so relaxing, so enjoyable. I would love to do that again. Without question, I would absolutely love to do that again. I don't think I'll ever be able to, because I'm not going back until July 11th. But yeah, it was amazing to be there and not be subject to all of the noise pollution from buses and people and, you know, babies screaming and things like that. I mean, it was just so nice. We went to somebody asked in the chat about the breakfast at Topolino. So yeah, So we checked in at the Polynesian at 6:30. Obviously, the room was ready because no one had stayed in it the night before. We went and dropped off our stuff in the room, and then we drove over to Riviera for breakfast. We had a 7:30 breakfast reservation at Topolino, the first one as soon as they opened, because we wanted to be one of the first people there. We got there. There were 3 parties total in the restaurant for at least the first hour or so. There was us, there was the Brickers, and there was another vlogger dude that refused to wear a mask. But it was a nice breakfast. We had a great view. Obviously, we had a table near the window. We had a great view. What was really interesting was the characters that came out. The characters came out one at a time and sort of danced around, and they went in a circle around the restaurant, usually twice. And then they went back in. And then, 5 minutes later, another character came out. So this happened pretty frequently. There was a character that came out, every 5 or 7 minutes. But they didn't, they sort of stopped in front of your table. Like, if you had your camera ready and you wanted to take a selfie with you in your seat and the character behind you, like, they were aware of that, and would stop and would sort of pause for you to do that. But they were told, don't stop at tables, because they didn't want, like, kids running up to hug the characters, which is, something that absolutely would have happened at most of their character breakfasts. There weren't any kids at this character breakfast. There were the 5 adults at our table and 2 adults at the Brickers table, and the other vlogger dude was by himself. So there were no kids. So I don't think they had to worry about that too much. The breakfast itself, I wouldn't recommend. The breakfast is a fixed price of like $42, I think, and you get your selection from the menu. The menu is a little bit more limited, and the thing that everybody got that was the best value was a steak, and they don't have that anymore. I'm assuming because money. So they say limited menu to make it act like, well, it's kind of, they have to limit the menu because of whatever. But it's really just they take the most expensive items off the menu. But the other stuff we got was good. The food is great. I have no problem with the food. It's just not a good value. And depending on what you get, there's a fruit plate on that menu. There's like 2 vegetarian options, I think. One is a fruit plate with yogurt. That is really like, that should be like a $6 little fruit container, but they charge you $42 for it. It did have gooseberries, and I had never had a gooseberry before, so that was kind of interesting. But I certainly wouldn't pay $42 for a gooseberry for breakfast. But I don't know where else you can get gooseberries at Walt Disney World. There's a mushroom frittata with plant-based sausage and plant-based eggs, and that was pretty bad. There was, I think Tom had some kind of waffle thing. I had an egg thing that was pretty good. So the food is fine. But it's really expensive. And so, we had sort of finished up, and the chef comes out to ask us how much we liked our breakfast. He's like, were you happy? Were you pleased? Was everything to your liking? And we said, yeah, the food was good. We missed the steak, but, not a huge surprise that that's something they took off the menu. And he's like, we have a lot of food, so do you want something else? And so 3 of us ordered, like, there was a smoked salmon and bagel thing on the menu that I would have gotten, but I thought it wasn't a good value for $42. But I really wanted to get it because I really like smoked salmon, so I got that. And I think Axel got a pancake or a waffle or something. I mean, 3 of us got second dishes, so we basically had second breakfast. That made $42 a decent value. Without having, like, essentially a whole second breakfast, then $42 isn't a great value. They do bring out, like, a pastry bucket with some muffins and some croissants, and those were fine, but they're not anything special. So I mean, if you need to do a character breakfast, and you want to see characters, all character breakfasts in my mind are overpriced for what you get. Some are obviously better than others. 1900 Park Fair used to be one of my favorites because the food is really good. Ohana with Lilo and Stitch is the food's very good too, so it's better than something like Chef Mickey's where the food is terrible. This one, the food was good. It's just very little for what you pay. But I can't really... This is going to be the only character meal at Walt Disney World when they open. There's not going to be character meals anywhere else. They've said that this is the only character meal that there's going to be. Maybe because it makes them the most money. I mean, it's one of the very few that are not buffets, so obviously most buffets are closed at this point. Well, all the buffets are closed. And so it's one of a few character meals that's not a buffet style. Certainly Ohana is family style, and they could make that work. Whispering Canyon is family style, and they make that work. So they could add more if they wanted to. I just don't know. I think part of the issue is that are people willing to pay the same price with much less character interaction? Like, if you can't get a picture of your kid hugging the characters, that's kind of a deal breaker for a lot of people. Like, that's the kind of thing that makes the character meals worth the money, because it sure isn't the food, but it's those kinds of interactions. And without those interactions, I would say a character meal is absolutely not worth the money. Topolino's neat because you get characters in unique outfits that are not seen anywhere else. But you still can't do anything. They just parade around. And so I think people are going to do this character meal because it's the only one there is. But I don't think it's going to be really worth the money, and I don't think people are really going to feel like they got a good value out of it. I mean, I wouldn't go back. I'd go back to Topolino for, like, dinner because the view's great. I wouldn't go back to Topolino for breakfast because it's just not worth it. So that's the character breakfast. What's that? Oh, all right. Yeah. So that was breakfast on the first day, Monday. So let's take a break as Kevin requested, and we'll come back and I'll tell you about the rest of the day, and the next day and the day after that. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
4 panelists, 30 minutes, 1 week in Disney Parks news. This is Parks Center. On Parks Center, the panel and I cover the top 7... 7? Yeah, 7 Disney Park stories of the past week. From attraction news to transportation scandals to new food and merchandise, we'll cover it all in 30 minutes or less. You can watch us stream live every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. at wdwntunes.com, watch episodes on demand at youtube.com/wdwnt, or subscribe to the audio version of the show on your favorite podcast app.
Dreamfinders is WDW News Today's podcast all about the creative culture surrounding Disney parks. Authors, Imagineers, dancers, actors, photographers, filmmakers, and a whole lot more have all stopped by to chat about how Disney has inspired their artistic work.
But I still remember sitting in conference tables and looking across at Michael and Jeffrey Katzenberg and this sort of little 6-year-old inside of me going, what in heaven's name is going on here?
And we're off and running, and Tony needs someone to lay it out for him. And there's no architect available. So the next thing I know, I'm laying out the pavilion.
I got to tell you, I have not enjoyed a podcast so much. It's just a warm conversation, and warm and intelligent conversation, which you don't find that often in podcasts.
Dreamfinders. Episodes drop every other Tuesday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcatcher.
WDW News Tonight is our weekly comedy show combining the news of the week, comedy segments, thoughtful discussions, insane characters, parody commercials, games, and more. Watch live on Thursdays at 9 p.m. and become a Wigs member to get access to a bonus post show. Watch WDW News Tonight episodes anytime and live on YouTube, or get the audio-only version on iTunes and other podcast services.
We were talking about everything going on at Walt Disney World this week, including the DVC Resorts opening. If you missed our Park Pass discussion, you can speed back to the beginning of the show where we talked about that. I just want to give a shout out to Annette in the chat, who's from Scotland and is staying up till 2:20 in the morning to watch us. Thank you very much, Annette, for staying up and watching us. So where I was, we checked into the Polynesian Monday morning. We went over to Topolino's for the first character breakfast ever since the parks closed. Went back to the Polynesian. We went in the pool. We had reservations at Sanaa for dinner, so we went over there. Sanaa's what you expected. It's not really anything different. It's very good. The bread service is the best. We had a great time. Wasn't very crowded. But the service is still pretty slow there, so we had to wait a while past our reservation time to actually get in. Shout out to another watcher, Bex Bunce, who's in London, also up very late to watch us. Thanks for watching. So we had Sanaa dinner. That was great. Polynesian Pool, we spent like all afternoon in the pool. That was really nice, really relaxing. There weren't too many people there. It was a pretty hot day. So Tom wanted to do the water slide and walked up to the water slide, and the concrete was so hot that it burned his feet. It was a really hot day. It was a great day for the pool. Only the main pool at the Polynesian was open. The Oasis pool was not open. Which was unfortunate because the Oasis pool is the smaller pool, but it has the better pool bar. Also, Tambu Lounge was not open, so we couldn't get drinks at Tambu. Pineapple Lanai was open, so you could get your Dole Whip with a shot of rum, and that's always good. And Captain Cook's was open at the Polynesian, but Ohana was not. Kona was open, and we had breakfast at Kona the next morning before we checked out. So the pool at the Polynesian is great. It's been a long time since I've been there. It's a really well-themed pool. It's really nice. It was a great day. It was so relaxing. It was so nice. We walked around a lot of the Polynesian. As I said, I walked over to the Grand Floridian. Axel was staying over at the Grand Floridian, and I walked over there, and we had a nice time, took some pictures, some eerie pictures of like the Luau Cove being completely empty and weird things like that. There's a lot of sights to be seen that you may not ever see again. And just walking around the resorts with almost no people is kind of surreal, but fantastic. We ended up going over to the Enchanted Rose after Sanaa, I believe. So it was fairly late. We were the only people in the Enchanted Rose. It's a great bar. Fantastic views. It was my first time at the Enchanted Rose. The drinks were great. and the view is great. It's not the biggest bar, but it's fine. It's not a super crazy themed bar, but it's nice. It's on the expensive side, but it's really good. So it was nice. We went over and sat over there and had a nice time. Let's see. So then the next morning we got up. Bars are closed now, right? They weren't on Monday, but they are now. So yeah, like Enchanted Rose is closed. Jock Lindsay's open for a day and a half and is now closed. So honestly, I mean, it's not the bars on Disney property that are the issue, because there's no one there. So the next morning we woke up, and Tom is in the shower and is taking like a 45-minute shower like he usually does. And so I woke up and went, and the Polynesian has split bathrooms. So there's a shower in one of the bathrooms and a sink, and then in the other bathroom is the toilet and a bathtub and another sink. So that's kind of unique to the Polynesian, but it's relevant for this part of the story. Tom's in the shower for like 45 minutes. I get up and go into the other bathroom where the toilet is, and there's water all over the floor. It's like flooded. And I'm like, what is going on? So Tom gets out of the shower, and I say, Tom, look at this. And he's like, oh my gosh. When he was in the shower, the water like wouldn't go down the drain and was like backed up, and then came out of the sink, like started bubbling up out of the sink in that bathroom, and then apparently was bubbling up out of the toilet, unbeknownst to all of us, and sort of flooded the bathroom and the foyer of the room. So we were going to Kona for breakfast, and so instead of walking through the flood, we walked out the balcony or the patio door, because we were on the first floor. So we walked out the patio door into the Kona for breakfast, and stopped at the front desk and just made a mention, like, the room's kind of flooded, and I don't know if it like went into the room next to us or not, but somebody sort of ought to check, and so we told the front desk. And I think it was the manager that was there, and she said, I will, I'll send somebody right out to clean that up. I mean, we were checking out like 2 hours later, so it wasn't a big deal to us. It didn't really ruin our stay. I couldn't go to the bathroom when I wanted to, but I went when we went to the main building, and it was fine. But it wasn't a huge deal. I mean, it's a big deal, but it didn't really inconvenience us significantly. So we told the manager at the front desk, she's like, I will get somebody out there right away to clean it up, and then I will let you know. And we're like, well, we're going to Kona. She's like, I'll come up and find you in Kona. That's the kind of service that you don't get when the resorts are completely crowded. So we're sitting up at Kona. We're having a great breakfast in Kona. I got Tonga toast for the first time in a long, long time. It was great. Kona was not busy. It was a great meal. We had a great server. The manager comes up, as we're pretty much done breakfast. The manager comes up and says that they sent a plumber over and they fixed it, and they were going to comp our room for the night as an apology, which I totally didn't expect. Plus, it's DVC, and I mean, I know it's certainly easier to comp a room when they just don't have you pay for it, rather than have to credit back DVC points, which is kind of more difficult thing for them to do. So we were like ecstatic, and thought that was just really great guest service. Maybe it was because the first day they were opened. It is old plumbing, but those rooms were all refurbished right before they turned to DVC, so I don't know what the problem was. There were about 6 workmen digging in the sand on the beach right outside of our... So outside of our patio, there's some grass, and then there's a walkway, and then there's the sandy beach. There were like 6 people walking, digging in the sand, digging in the sand when we went back to our room, and we figured that had to be somehow related. So it looked like the plumbing problem was not necessarily in the room, but somewhere else in the plumbing. But anyway, so that was our experience at the Polynesian, but all the cast members were great. I want to answer a couple of questions from the chat. You're allowed to visit resorts without a hotel or dining reservation? No, you're not. You have to have a hotel or dining reservation to visit the resort, but there's a loophole that you can take a bus from Springs that we're not supposed to tell anyone about, so don't say anything. It's a secret. Let's see. The whole shutdown of the bars and stuff is kind of like I said. It's not the Disney bars that are the problem, because there's really no one there. We checked in after we had breakfast in Kona. We left the Polynesian and went over to the Bay Lake Tower at the Contemporary and checked in there. And it was about 11:30. We checked in there or something, and obviously our room was ready because they had plenty of availability. So we got right into our room. It was on the 12th floor with a theme park view, which was fantastic. I know Tom tweeted some pictures that day. So then we went over. I don't know what we did for lunch. I think we went to Contempo Cafe for lunch that day. So we went over to the main building, the Contemporary, did some shopping, had lunch at Contempo Cafe. It's really nice, really, really quiet all over the place. There were 2 people in Contempo Cafe. Got some pictures of Chef Mickey's totally empty, which was really kind of creepy. We twirled our napkins at Contempo Cafe in a show of solidarity with Chef Mickey, even though he wasn't there. But that was nice. And then, what did we do? Oh, so that was the night, was that the night we had? Oh, that was the night we had dinner at Beaches and Cream. So we went, it was raining in that afternoon, so we didn't go to the pool right when we got to the hotel. So we walked around and stuff and shopped, and then eventually the rain let up. We went in the pool for a bit, which was nice. The pool at Bay Lake Tower is pretty nice. It has a pretty nice slide. It's not huge, but it's big enough. Then we had a late dinner at Beach Club at the Beaches and Cream. So we went over there. Mm-hmm. This was my first time in Beaches and Cream since the renovation. And it doesn't have the same feel as before, but luckily it's much bigger because half the tables are out of service. And so even though it's a bigger restaurant now, it has about the same capacity as it did before the renovation, with half the tables being out of service. The food's good. The food's great. We got the kitchen sink. There were 7 of us. 7. I think there were 7 of us. So we got the kitchen sink, which is kind of a mess. And it's something to do once in your life, but not necessarily. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it because you eat like half of it, and then everything's all melted and like just mixes together, and it's kind of gross. But anyway, and then our night at the Contemporary was great. We were out on the balcony, taking some really nice nighttime photos of the Magic Kingdom and the Grand Floridian and everything. So it was really cool. It was really super weird to not hear the boats, the ferry boats, and the buses and everything again. So that was all really calm, really nice, really serene. A couple questions in the chat. What do you think about Disney basically only having moderates to deluxe resorts opening? Seems like a money move to me. Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, all the resorts that are open have DVC attached, so they have to open the DVC resorts so DVC members can use some of their points. So it doesn't sort of surprise me that that's the case.
And also just the capacity and the density of guests is, you have more room per guest. If you start opening up the value resorts, you start packing people in a lot more. So I don't think it's only money, although I do think that's part of it.
Yeah. No, I agree. It Yeah, and like the moderate and deluxe resorts have table service restaurants where the values do not, and so it enables them to have dining reservations and control the number of people, whereas like the all-star food courts could get a little crazy if they were full. So there was all that. We went to Whispering Canyon the next morning for breakfast. It's the first time I've been to Whispering Canyon in ages, and I don't think I've ever been there for breakfast. It was a fantastic breakfast. Whispering Canyon is now one of my top 2 to 3 breakfasts on property. We stayed in the Contemporary, and we almost decided to go to the Wave for breakfast, but obviously they don't have the buffet. And somebody had said they don't have the sweet potato pancakes, which is like deal killer right there. The other thing that's my favorite at the Wave is the grits. And so I probably would have just gotten grits for breakfast at the Wave, but we said, let's do Whispering Canyon because none of us had been there for breakfast ever, and I hadn't been there in ages. So we decided to do Whispering Canyon. It was fantastic. Very, very good food. And it's family style, so you could get more of anything. There were 3 of us. There's 3 different like skillets, and there were 3 of us. So we each ordered one of the skillets, and that way then she came out and she's like, since you ordered all 3 skillets, I can get all of you reorders of anything from any of the skillets, which was cool because the one skillet had an egg spinach, an egg white frittata that was really good. That it wasn't in my skillet, but I got to try it. So that was nice. But I highly recommend Whispering Canyon for breakfast. We were the only people there. I think there was another party that came in halfway through our breakfast, but there was nobody there. No one. But yeah, highly recommend Whispering Canyon breakfast. I will absolutely go back there for breakfast. It was really, really good.
We had, and I know, Jason, you and I talked about it. We had, like I said at the beginning, we had dinner at Whispering Canyon, and it had been a while since I had been there as well. And the traditional skillet for dinner is amazing. And we had refills of that, and the cornbread was good. And again, it was almost completely empty. But they still had the glass jars for soda, and they still, they were just again incredibly nice at that restaurant too. And again, dinner, breakfast, that's a really good choice. And I'm really hoping that, like you talked about before, that they start making the move, at least temporarily, on some of these restaurants that have been buffet to this family style, so that you can still open those restaurants and have food, because the family style, I mean, we got more than our fill of food.
Yeah, and the food's better quality because in for the most part it's made to order, even though it comes out in a family style skillet. So the food at Whispering Canyon was fantastic. Whispering Canyon's always been one of my favorite dinners. But we decided they had a beef brisket for breakfast, and in the meat lovers skillet, I think it was called, and it was really, really good. So we were super happy with this. They have a cheddar biscuit with sausage gravy that was amazing too. Like, not even the sausage gravy was fine, it was good. The biscuit itself was amazing. It was so moist and not dry or crumbly. We just ordered more biscuits. We didn't even bother with the sausage gravy. We ordered a second round of biscuits. It was so good. So yeah, highly recommended. But yeah, I think that for certain things they could certainly do tables, family style meals in place of the buffet, and it would turn out better. It would certainly be better food quality, I think, when it comes out sort of to order, or at least plated to order. But then there's certain things like Chef Mickey's where, half of the attraction is the characters, and so you're not going to get the characters the same way. Then you've got the problem with Chef Mickey's where you twirl your napkin, so you've been eating scrambled eggs, and then you wipe your face, and then you twirl a napkin and shoot scrambled eggs to all of the other tables around you. That can't be a good thing. So I can't see that continuing on at Chef Mickey's. I mean, that's been That's been a big problem I've had with Chef Mickey's since forever, other than the bad food, is that people twirl dirty napkins and spread food particles all over the place. So I stay away from that place as much as possible. But there are certainly breakfasts that like 1900 Park Fair, that's a great breakfast with a great food. I mean, they have like an omelet station at that one, which is great. So I could see them doing something like that, family style too. But yeah, I think a lot of the buffets could turn to family style, and it would be great. It would be a huge improvement. Somebody said like a while ago, not anything related to Disney, but it was like a news article. It was like, could COVID spell the end of buffets? It might be good if it did. I mean, I love buffets, but most of them are not good. The food is worse quality than if you ordered something off the menu. And so if they convert to family style, I think that'll be a definitely step up of food quality, which is cool.
Can I just tell you one little thing that I think is funny about the characters is that my kids are older. My daughter does not like character meals. A lot of times it's dad's going because I want to have my picture taken, and I will get out of the booth and she will take the picture as opposed to vice versa. But when we went to Trattoria Al Forno for the breakfast that they have with Flynn and Rapunzel and Ariel and Eric, she, I didn't tell her the last year before that's what we were going to do. And I was just like, oh, this is a great breakfast. And then the characters are there and she's like, I don't want any part of this. And the breakfast was really good. And so when we sat down, Flynn Rider came around to the table and kind of sat down. It's like, oh, she doesn't like this, does she? And then we were like, nah. And so he got up real close to her and we took some pictures. When we were staying there this time, because that was actually one of the few things that was open on the boardwalk, we were kind of excited about the possibility of eating there, having that breakfast that she loved, but not having to deal with the characters.
Right.
Which is a great twist, because normally you want the character breakfast when you're going to Disney.
Yeah.
She just wanted the pancakes with the Rapunzel flower on the front. But anyway, I just thought that was funny.
That's funny. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I can't really see anyone eating at Chef Mickey's voluntarily without characters being there. I don't know why you would subject yourself to that food.
Ouch.
But, Crystal Palace the same way. But so after breakfast, we went back to the Contemporary. We had to check out, so we checked out. We walked around the Contemporary. We went back to the shops just to see if there was anything else. And then we went down to the first floor to see, and it's like the whole front desk area is empty, and the little coffee shop they have there is empty. There were still beans in the coffee grinder at that little coffee shop, so I'd recommend, if you go to the Contemporary, don't get a coffee at that coffee shop until at least a couple days have passed and they've replaced the beans, because it's like... it's like nuclear holocaust and everything is just frozen in time, and the coffee beans are still in the grinder. Weird. But there's nobody at the front desk. It was so eerie. But we got great pictures of like that, and the chandeliers in the little waiting areas, the seating areas there was neat. I got great pictures of the Mary Blair murals on the 4th floor concourse. Without people in front, it was fantastic. We went down to the Wave. Not to eat, but just to have a drink at the bar, and great bartender was there, and made us whatever drink we wanted, and the chef from the Wave came out just to chat with the bartender or something, because I guess he didn't have anything to do, and we asked him if they still had the sweet potato pancakes, and he said yes. So if you're thinking of going to the Wave, but decided not to because you couldn't get sweet potato pancakes, they are there. The other thing I forgot to mention, so I love the grits at the Wave. They're so good. Polynesian has a smoked Gouda grits on their menu. And I had gotten, we ordered a bowl of them to share, because I'd never gotten them before. That's something relatively new on the Kona Cafe menu. Those were really good too. So if you can't get your grits at the Wave, you can always get the smoked Gouda grits at Kona Cafe, and they are absolutely at least on the same level, if not a touch better, than the ones at the Wave. So if you're a grits fan, that's where to get them. If you're not a grits fan, you should try, because I'm not a grits fan, but those are the two places I will eat grits because they're so good. Anyway, so yeah, then we went to Springs, then we went to Olivia's for lunch. Then I had to leave, so I took Magical Express back to the airport. So I booked Magical Express when we checked into Bay Lake, and we knew it would be running because they had announced that it would be running. What we didn't realize was that no one would really be using it, and so I had the entire Magical Express bus to myself. So they picked me up in the afternoon. I got my luggage from the Bell Services and went out to the bus, and the bus driver was very apologetic. He's like, "I'm very sorry that this bus is so small, and we will be taking a much bigger bus next time you come." That he was joking because it was the full-size bus, but I was the only one on it. So it was super funny. I mean, the TVs and the announcements and the video and everything were all the same. That's all the same. But it was just, I was the only one on the bus. And so the paper, that they print you up a paper at the front desk that you're supposed to give to the bus driver when you board the bus. And the paper actually says on it specifically that there's no guarantee that the vehicle that you ride in will be a Disney's Magical Express bus, because sometimes they stick you on a bus that's a cruise line bus or just a regular Mears bus, because Mears runs all of those things. It doesn't matter. You know, they're all Mears buses. So they say specifically, so that I guess so you're not disappointed, that it won't necessarily be a Disney's Magical Express bus. Mine was, which was cool. I honestly expected it to be a taxi because I was the only one on it. But no, they had a full-size bus just for me. And it was kind of funny, but it was not unexpected, but it was certainly a bit surreal.
Can I throw a couple things in?
Surprised.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I am surprised they didn't do like a minivan or something. I wonder. I'm very surprised. They were expecting others and they didn't show up, or I don't know.
I mean, you had to book this ahead of time. You couldn't just show up. So I mean, they
right,
knew.
But I wonder if somebody booked and didn't end up coming.
That's possible. It's possible there were supposed to be more people on that bus than just me, and they opted for an Uber or whatever. That certainly is possible. Because yeah, I mean, you couldn't put more than one person in a minivan or whatever. So yeah, that makes some sense.
I was going to say though that the one of the things that you were talking about how peaceful Polynesian was, there was sort of an eerie feeling at the boardwalk because there is usually a kinetic energy happening at the boardwalk, either because Jelly Rolls is open on one side or people are leaving Epcot on the other, or but it was completely
empty or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was completely empty. A lot of those places weren't open. ESPN Club wasn't open. Jelly Rolls, Atlantic Dance. The only places that were really open were the Boardwalk Pizza, the Pizza Window, the Boardwalk Bakery, the gift shop, and the Abracadabra, and they were only open till 9. So after 9, it's just ghost town out there, which was kind of cool. Being on the Crescent Lake and seeing everything at night and just kind of like being there and taking it all in was kind of cool, but that was a little bit eerie.
Yeah.
You were talking about also like things kind of frozen in time. One of the things that I noticed, and again, this was my first time being down there since all this happened. I know it was your first time. You were down a week before. I know Ashley was down a couple weeks before that. And, a lot of our people live there. But it was weird to me to see the digital billboards that still had Happily Ever After fireworks on them, Epcot Flower and Garden Festival on them. And I'm looking at those.
Flower and Garden, yes.
Yeah, Flower and Garden, which it says on the board in June 4th, and I get it if it's a practical billboard that they had to paint and they didn't want to replace it yet. But a digital billboard, why could you not put a thank you to our first responders from Disney or something else? If you already
because the cast members that know how to
furloughed.
I was going to say the people who know how to reprogram.
Well, I was going to. But so it seems like something.
I saw Flower and Garden signs in the airport.
They could have at least shut that stuff down, I would think. But the other thing that I thought was interesting is that at AMC, they still have posters up for all the movies that were there when AMC closed. Again, looks like a great place where you, even if you just have one manager who's kicking around the building who could have put up posters that said, back soon or be safe or something, but it was Onward and Knives Out, and it was like a time capsule as everyone else is moving through Disney Springs and everything else is, or most things are open. Seeing those posters there was just that reminder of things are not back to normal. Things are still weird. This was just, again, frozen in time. So
I mean, what else worse than the flower and garden signs in the baggage claim area of the airport were weird, but weirder yet was driving on the Beeline 528 from the airport. There's a big sign for Galaxy's Edge. It says now open. I'm like, no, it's not now open. It was now open, but it's not open anymore. So that was really weird too. Just because no one had bothered to even think about, hey, maybe we shouldn't advertise this as now open when we're closed. But yeah, people in the chat want to, couple of questions. Somebody said Boardwalk is closed till October, but the DVC part of the Boardwalk is open now. So the Boardwalk in the regular rooms are closed till October, but the DVC half, or like the DVC 3/4 is really more like it, is open now. And people are really asking if we can get to the discussion part about if we see the parks opening or what's going to happen. So we know that Walt Disney World is supposed to open on July 11th. We also, and that's a Saturday. We also know that Disneyland announced they were going to open on July 17th because that's their anniversary. What is that? The 65th anniversary. So it's kind of a big one.
Yep.
And so they were supposed to open on July 17th for their 65th anniversary. Florida and California, if you haven't been able to figure out, are two very, very different states. And so Florida said, we're going to let the theme parks come up with their own plans to reopen, and then we'll take a look at them, and then if we approve them, they can reopen. And so Universal came up with a plan to reopen, and it got approved, and they reopened. Disney World came up with a reopening plan, and theirs got approved, so then they announced July 11th was the date they reopened. Just today, I think it was the governor of Florida complimented Universal on their reopening plans and how well they've executed those plans and how well things have gone there, and it hasn't turned into being like a coronavirus hotspot. Maybe they don't know that, but I don't think it is, honestly.
Well, didn't a whole bunch of kids just test positive that work at Forbidden Journeys?
We've heard that. I don't know.
I mean, I'm not blaming. I think they're still trying, but I do find it comical that, hey, they're doing such a great job.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you'd get that. I think you'll get that anywhere, honestly. Like,
it's not unavoidable, though.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and so then after the cases started to go up, like the Uniqlo store at Disney Springs decided to close back down. They're the only ones that have, I think, since the cases started to skyrocket. It was kind of weird to be in Florida and you get there and things are like going pretty well, and then by the time you leave, there's all this like cases are skyrocketing and this is the new epicenter, and I'm like, I'm here. It's weird. We were with my mom and my sister. My mom works in an office, and they actually called her in the middle of the week and said, we want you to self-quarantine for 14 days and do not come into the office when you get back from Florida. So that was weird. So Disney is supposed to reopen on July 11th, with the governor saying today that Universal has put into place, complimented them on their plans that they've put into place and how things are going with the reopening. There's no way that I can see that the state's going to tell Disney they can't open. And just for money reasons, there's no way that Disney's not going to open on July 11th. So I think July 11th is pretty much written in stone, pretty much no matter what happens. I think it would take something pretty catastrophic to have Disney not reopen. And I mean, you've got like almost 2 weeks, so it's possible that, like, 3/4 of the residents of Florida could test positive for coronavirus. That may cause Disney to rethink their opening on July 11th, but short of something that extreme, I don't see it happening. California's a whole nother case, because California didn't say, hey, parks, you can submit plans for reopening, we'll approve them. No, California, being the kind of state that it is, said, we're going to develop plans for theme parks to reopen, and you will have to follow our plans. And we're not really in any hurry to develop these plans, so I know you wanted to open July 17th, but we're just not going to come out with these plans for another couple weeks yet, so your July 17th reopening date is really not going to happen, because even if we come out with the plans by July 17th, you're not going to have enough time to react to the plans and get things set up the way that we're going to tell you have to do it. So yeah, that's what happened in California. That's clearly not happening in Florida. And so, like I said, I don't think that, I think it's going to take something pretty extreme for Disney World to not open on July 11th as scheduled. Now, whether there's restrictions, like all bars can't open, that's certainly something that can happen. There may be other restrictions that the state could come up with, but making them closed in altogether, I don't think that's going to happen. I really don't foresee that happening. And like we talked about this week and last week, I think Universal's been great. Honestly, I think the biggest problem in Florida is that there's not a mandate to wear a mask. Orange County put one into place while I was there. They didn't have one in place for forever. It was sort of an optional recommended thing. And I think that's the root of the problem. In states like Pennsylvania, where there's been a mask mandate in place forever, almost all the counties in the entire state are now in the green phase of reopening. Florida went to that green phase much earlier than we did, but we still have a mask mandate even though we're in the green phase, and Florida doesn't. And so I think that's the root of the problem. And so it makes sense that they have to shut bars down, because you go to bars and there's a lot of people and you can't wear a mask because you're drinking and you're very in close quarters. And so that's, I think, certainly a logical response, because it's a huge gathering of people and they're not wearing masks. But everywhere else, in the theme parks, in the resort hotels, everybody's wearing masks, and it's fine. I felt very safe. I felt much safer in the Universal parks, and I felt much safer in the Disney resorts than I did at the grocery store in Florida.
You know what, Jason?
So
you were saying that
states.
I'm sorry. The day that you were there, that you said like it hit its highest number, and I'm looking at the number, and it was 5,500 in Florida. The day that I left, it was almost 9,000.
Yeah, so now it's over 10,000.
We definitely liked seeing it in our rearview mirror by that point. But I agree with you that it was you really felt safe at Universal and at Disney. And when we were driving, so we drove up and we stopped in Jacksonville for lunch, and we got out and we were wearing our masks, and we went into a restaurant, and I won't say which one, but it was just like a walk-up restaurant. And we walked in, and there were no people in the restaurant wearing masks, not the customers, not the people working behind the counter. No one was wearing a mask in the place. There were 10 people behind the counter working, and another, I don't know, 20 inside. And they had a condiment station that was, their individual cups, but they were in a big bowl, so you could just like rub your hands around in there. Drink stations, there was no problem with like walking up to the drink station, whereas Chicken Guy at Disney Springs, they had somebody working it. You had to come up and show them your receipt, and they would pour you one. Yeah, so like the what we're calling like the Disney bubble, you felt so safe, and when you got out of it in Florida, it is kind of a nightmare, because you were talking about the grocery store being more of a risk. Walking into that place, we literally walked out. We were like, we can't do this, and so we actually went somewhere like one other place, and most people were wearing masks, and we're like, this is like acceptable risk, we'll do this. And then let's not stop again until we get to North Carolina, which is where we live, because there's a mask law in place. I don't understand why there isn't one everywhere. And I get that some people don't like to wear them and all that. It's just, it after being in that bubble and feeling that safety of, we're all wearing masks. We're all in this together. We're keeping our social distance. We were using hand sanitizer. We're doing all the things we're supposed to do. And then walking around just, a couple hours away, it almost felt uneasy. And this is the crazy part. There were places where I would walk in, and a guy walking in with a mask seemed like the reasonable person and not the risky person. As opposed to normally, the guy who walks in with a mask might seem like the risky person.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like walking in even at the gas station, nobody was wearing one, and I just don't get it.
Yeah. I kind of feel like. Go ahead, David.
I find it interesting, your comments, Jason, about Florida, and you're absolutely right. I mean, even today, Governor DeSantis declined to mandate masks for whatever reason. But, so if he's not even willing to take that step, he is certainly not going to take any steps that are going to change the trajectory of reopening the parks. I think only Disney could do that themselves. It doesn't seem like they're necessarily leaning that direction in any way. I think they're looking at Universal as a success. I think Universal's probably looking at it as a success despite having to lay off more workers. But I think in Florida, we're absolutely going to see it. Now, for California, I still think that there's a chance they still open in July. We got some heat during the week saying that all theme parks will be open by the end of July. I mean, that was based on the news we had at the time. That was right before the Disney story broke.
Based on Disney's announcement.
Right, right. So, but I still think, some of this feels a little bit like they're trying to pressure the state of California to make those plans, and by having to announce that delay is putting more pressure on the government of California to do that. So I still think there's a chance that they will open in July, just a little bit later in the month. But, I don't see the types of numbers occurring in California necessarily that we're seeing in Florida right now. But I still think in either case, you're going to see those theme parks open probably at the very latest mid-August, unless something catastrophic happens.
Yeah, I mean, Disneyland certainly could open by the end of July, but until Disney, comes out and makes an announcement, I don't think we know. It's too much reliant on the state to come out with guidelines, and if history's any indication, the guidelines in California are going to be much stricter than the ones in Florida, and so who knows? We'll see what happens, but. Yeah,
they may have to go wipe down every vehicle.
Right.
That
could certainly be the case.
Yeah. Well, and I think they are trying to put pressure, but I don't know if it's going to work. I mean, as somebody that lived in California, and I'm sure if we have any Californians here, they can attest. And somebody even said it in the chat. There's two things going against Disney in this case. One, the Orange County out in California, their economy is not as dependent on Disneyland as the theme parks in Orlando. That economy is dependent upon those theme parks. So there's not as much pressure there. Not only that, but there's a long history of bad blood between the California government and Disneyland. Sometimes they get along, sometimes they don't, but they don't generally get along very well. So I don't know how much them trying to play chicken with the California government is going to help or actually hurt them. Because I could just as easily see California digging in their heels and saying, you don't need to open. We're not going to let you open. And that's just that.
Right.
And prolonging even longer the more Disney pushes and, tries to get them to open that. But I do think, and it's something, and to kind of circle back to, just because I know we're probably going to have to wrap up here soon. For people that have the pass, like the Premier Pass, where you're supposed to be able to get in wherever you want to both sides, and even people down in Florida or just in California that have, a full pass that has park hopper access. I cannot believe that Disney is not still extending out, either refunding a portion or is going to extend their passes out an additional year. And I am curious, to see if people actually sue or something, because they're not getting what they were contractually promised with that pass. I know it's not necessarily Disney's fault, but they're not getting what they were promised. They're not getting the value of that ticket. And I think it was even Jill in our kind of like company group chat was saying, it's not right. I'm not getting what I paid for, when she was trying to make her annual pass holder reservations, because now she can only reserve 3 days, and it was such a pain in the neck. She was having so much trouble. And it's like, it's not fair. I have no actual advantage versus the people that just have regular tickets. Like, what did I spend all this money for?
Right. Yep. I mean, that's honestly the case with Universal, because Universal's has like 4 tiers of annual passes, and the lower tiers have blackout dates and stuff. But because no one's going, Universal has removed the blackout dates from all the lower passes. So now I spent like almost twice as much for my Premier Pass as like their seasonal pass, and the number of perks I have do not add up to the extra money that I paid, because all the blackout dates are now lifted for everybody across the board. So, that's a problem. That's going to be a problem that everyone has to address. All the park operators have to address at some point in Disneyland too. And then there's the people that have the Disney Premier Pass, where Walt Disney World's open, but Disneyland's not, and they have to make an extension. And how can they extend the Disney World half of the pass, but not the Disneyland half of the pass? It's going to get really complicated. And certainly, they're giving people an extra 30 days on the pass, but 30 days is 8% of what you paid for the pass. So for, an $800 annual pass, it's like, what is it, 8% is, I can't even add at this point. $64. So they think basically by giving you $64, you're going to stop complaining and be happy with what happened. And the fact that annual pass holders can't get in the parks anymore that's not going to, $64 is not going to make those people happy. Disney should absolutely know that their annual pass holders are very fickle and prone to complaining, and giving them a month that they can't really use right now is not going to suffice.
Like, I know that it would be financial suicide, but I'm almost kind of surprised that, especially when all this started really going down and, reopening and reservations and all this jazz, that they didn't just cancel all the annual passes and refund the money and say, sorry guys, you're gonna have to buy regular, we'll give you a discount on regular, day tickets, but you're gonna have to roll your dice like everybody else, just to make it easier for them to try to figure out where to start back again, rather than all this funky math with extra months and extending out days and renewal dates and
plus you've got the issue that not only Disney's also saying they're going to extend people's passes an extra month, but they're not doing it yet. And so they opened up park reservations to annual pass holders, but they haven't extended their dates. So if your pass expires middle of July, it still expires the middle of July, and you can't make an end of July park pass reservation because they haven't extended it yet. But you can't renew it either, because you can't renew passes now. So, like, you have an annual pass and you intend on renewing it, and it should be valid till October, but it's not, and they haven't put the extensions in the system, or at least not the 30 extra days extensions. So they're also screwing you there, because you should be able to make reservations and you can't do anything about it, because even if you want to give them more money and renew your pass, you can't. So their whole system is such a disaster, and they really, really need, like, this would have been a great time to bring on some, really good programmers and say, just rewrite everything from the ground up. Like, fix our whole system. We already canceled everybody's hotel plans and dining and Fast Pass. So just shut everything else off, and let's put a brand new system in place that works, and we can fix things once and for all. This would have been a great time to do it. They didn't, obviously, because it would have cost a lot of money. But the amount of hassle that they are putting people through is just unreal. Like the hours and hours that people spent on Monday morning trying to make park passes. I mean, you probably had 100,000 people waste 2 to 3 hours trying to do this. That's just absurd. That's just a company that doesn't care about their customers. And they have a system that doesn't work, and they know it. And then they turn around and say, our system's fine, and it must be the users that are the problem. That's just a company that doesn't care about its customers. And all this is going to come back and bite them at some point. I guarantee it.
You know what, though? I think all
the annual
this...
pass holders... I think the pass holder complaints are just sort of the tip of the iceberg with this system not working like it should and people complaining. So, yeah. Go ahead, Rob.
I was just going to say all of this kind of, to me, points back to I don't think that Disney can – I mean, if it's up to Disney to delay the reopening of Florida, all of what you've just said is a perfect example of why they absolutely won't. Because of all the people who sat in all the hours to do all of those reservations and all the bookings that they've accepted for annual pass holders. If everybody who is an annual pass holder wasn't upset now, and I get, I honestly 100% have some concerns about the safety because of the numbers of COVID going up. But at the same time, I do think that there will be, there will be some level of safety inside the Disney bubble. But I can't imagine the nightmare that will happen if they decide to pull the plug on the July 11th opening date and move it to, say August or September at this point with all of these new things that the reservations and the extensions and everything else. I just don't see how they can do it.
No, it's going to be it's a mess as it is, and it's just going to be a worse mess if they do that. There's no way they can do it. Like I said, short of like an extreme occurrence of something, they're not. I really don't see it. I don't see it possible. And is the other thing that I want to say, and we got to wrap this show up pretty quick. The other thing I want to say is there's like cast member petitions out there that say no, it's dangerous, it's unsafe, we shouldn't be opening, yada yada yada. There's also tons of cast members out there, and we met a lot of them who are like, I'm so glad the people are coming back because I can't afford to live unless I'm working, and this is my job, and so I need to eat and I need money to buy food, and this is the only way that I can get it because the Florida unemployment system is broken or whatnot. I mean, that was the case for a long time. I think a lot of them are finally getting some unemployment payments, but still, there's all these people that want to go back to work, and so Disney has come up with a system. We didn't talk about this. It's been in the news, though. Disney's come up with a system where when they call back furloughed cast members, you can decline the first time, and then like they'll just keep going down the seniority list. But then if they come back around and call you back a second time because they need you for whatever position, then you can't decline. I think that's reasonable. I mean, they are also providing like face shields now to cast members who are in close contact with guests and stuff. But like I said, Disney with the mask rules is not where the surge of coronavirus cases are coming from. It's not. It's either the grocery store where no one wears masks, or it's the bars that were allowed to reopen without social distancing and no masks. It's not the parks. Disney is probably safer than most grocery stores in Florida. It's clearly safer than that restaurant you went to in Jacksonville, Rob.
Yep.
And it's simply because they're requiring people to wear masks. So, I mean, I'm not trying to say that the people who are afraid of coming back to work and getting coronavirus, that's a legit fear. But at the same time, there's plenty of cast members that want to come back to work, and people signing a petition that says they shouldn't open are denying those cast members that want to come back the opportunity to like make a living. So that's kind of my feeling. But yeah, at this point, based on what's happening in Florida, from the governor's office and things, there's no way that the state is going to tell Disney they can't reopen. It's going to have to be a decision that Disney makes on their own, and it's pretty clear that I don't think they're going to do it. There's no way they're going to cause this much ruckus and give up this much revenue when they've got these opening plans in place and they've been approved by the state. So that's my 2 bits. anybody else want to ask any questions, add anything else? Yeah, somebody in the chat said Shanghai's extending passes as long as reservations are needed. Oh, that's Kevin. Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, so the question is, why, if Shanghai's doing that, why isn't Walt Disney World? I think they might almost have to at some point, because otherwise annual pass holders aren't getting what they paid for. They're not getting what's the part of the contract. So anyway, I'll just open this up to the rest of the panel to say any last words, things that you forgot to mention, or whatever else that we might have talked about that you just thought, you know, you want to talk about before we wrap this thing up.
David?
I'll make one final statement, and this is related to the point you were saying earlier, Jason, about Disney's IT team. You know, I work at IT. I've done consulting for a long time, so I've worked with a lot of different IT departments in various companies. I've seen good IT departments. I've seen very poor IT departments. I've made no secret of my disappointment with Disney's IT group and their overall general development group. I know they consulted a fair amount of that work out, which I think is part of the problem, but it consistently surprises me that there's such a disconnect between what the technology teams are working on and producing and what their guests really need and want. It just the fact that they can't connect the two is unbelievable to me in a company that was built on customer service and listening to the customers. So it doesn't surprise me that they're having these issues, but I wish you could get a CIO and a CTO in there that could turn that thing around.
Yeah, you know what? All I wanted to say, though, is that, 1 week ago, we were talking about what's going to happen with the system. And I was like, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. That was, that was a horrible tragedy. And I agree with you, David. Like everything, it seems like it is a common thread in everything when we're talking about Disney and their systems, whether it's MDX or Shop Disney or the reservation system. It just, something needs to happen at some point where they can get a little bit of consumer confidence back that it's not going to blow up, because so far they haven't let us down on any of it, whether it's Rise or anything else they've done. It has not let us down, that they have let us down. It's been consistent. So at least we can say that part of it's been consistent. But to Jason's point earlier, hundreds of thousands of people. Yeah, hundreds of thousands of people lost hours of their day, and then Disney turns around and says, "Oh, your fault. You did it. You screwed up." That's horrible, and it's a company that I love, and I hate to hear all of these things happening. So on the positive note, again, having gone there this week and being back on grounds and being home again, it just felt really good to be back there. So I do hope that the Florida numbers go down, that July 11th comes around and we're able to, go back into the parks and experience the Disney magic and see how hopefully Disney takes what they've learned from Universal and finds a way to plus it out, hopefully, so that we can then come back on the show and say, hey, you know what, while the system was down, we can still rely on the cast members, and they did a great job in coming in and opening up these parks, because, it's why we're all here. It's what we all love, is getting into the parks and having a magical day and getting around and sampling the foods and seeing the sights and smelling the smells. And I really hope that it all goes well, and that part of it, then we can turn back again and say, hey, look, good job, Disney. That's what I hope.
The other thing I just realized that we didn't talk about was the fact that Epcot is opening on July 15th and Food and Wine Festival is starting on July 15th. Whether it's a good idea to have a Food and Wine Festival in July is a question that's still up in the air, and I think we'll see that soon enough. It's also a modified version of the Food and Wine Festival. There's a lot missing. We didn't talk about that. I think it'll just be more interesting to see what happens when we get there. And so, obviously WWNT will be there to provide full coverage. I'll be there. Tom will be there. And a bunch of other reporters will be there to help us cover the opening of all these parks and the opening of the Food and Wine Festival when Epcot opens, which is crazy, in July. So, yeah, that'll all be real fun, too. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that when it happens in a couple weeks. Anything else from the panel? I want to give another shout out to Marklin, who gave us another super chat. And then he's asking Rob things about Boo Berry and Toucan Sam that I don't know about, so I'll just let you two have that conversation. But thanks again, Marklin, for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Thanks everybody who's been watching. Thanks everybody who watches every week. It's been great. I think these shows have been a lot of fun. Anything else from the panel?
No.
Nope. All right. So, big shout out to Kevin, who's been running all of the tech for the show, and reminds me that it's when it's time for a commercial break, and I don't see his message, and then he has to come in and say it. Thanks, Kevin. But thank you, David and Rob and Ashley, and thanks everybody for watching. Thanks for the great interaction in the chat, everybody. We're happy to answer questions, and we hope we answered a lot of your questions as we went along. So with that, I'll say good night, everybody. Have a great week, and we'll see you again next Sunday. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.